Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a brand new Shadow Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, Shadow Chandelure. This is definitely my most anticipated of the new Shadows. Chandelure already outputs a massive amount of damage, so adding the 20% damage boost from being a Shadow, this thing is going to output ridiculous damage. That, of course, does come with a cost. It's going to be extremely glassy, but nevertheless, I'm going to test it out in some Halloween Cup battles at Leaderboard Elo and see how it performs. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's check out Shadow Chandelure in the Halloween Cup. Hopping into the first match, picking up a Nightmare lead, Whimsicott into Venusaur. I save switch into Fortress. Opponent is going to farm up some energy and then send in a Carbink. So the opponent is core broken by the Shadow Fortress save switch. Mirror Shot will hit for double super effective damage. My opponent can consistently apply neutral damage with its rock moves, but the nice thing is Fortress does have some pretty good bulk. Able to withstand that rock slide, Fortress, its HP is getting very low, but it should be able to make back-to-back Mirror Shots here. Mirror Shot number 1 will get them low, and Mirror Shot number 2 will secure either switch advantage or shield advantage. Opponent is going to let the Mirror Shot go. Back in comes the Venusaur to farm down. In comes Shadow Chandelure. This thing is so glassy that I even have to shield a resisted Frenzy Plant, as that would basically one-shot. In the back, it's an Air Slash Mandibuzz, and I am absolutely core broken. I'm going to bank a Flame Charge and then send in the Whimsicott. Whimsicott will be hit with the Aerial Ace. I'm farming up a ton of energy with the Whimsicott. I'm expecting their shield on this move no matter what because they're afraid of a Moonblast, so I will bait with the slightly cheaper Grass Knot. Grass Knot gets to shield Mandibuzz, does not want to let me make it to another charge move, so they fire off their Aerial Ace. But throwing their energy may give me an opportunity. I send in the Shadow Chandelure. Shadow Chandelure, so frail, but outputs massive damage. This Flame Charge will get the Mandibuzz low. Looks like the opponent is committing to the fast move farm down con. It's going to be a race. Shadow Incinerate versus the Vine Whips, and on 1 HP, Shadow Chandelure secures the win. The bad leads continue in the next match, leading the Whimsicott into a Frostlass. I save switch into the Fortress, and the Fortress is met with a Shadow Houndoom. You have got to be kidding me. That's something I noticed is a lot of teams in the Elo range I'm in are running very fast move, pressure heavy teams. I'm going to send in the Shadow Chandelure, and Chandelure is able to get the Resisted Incinerate farm down. Opponent sends in the Frostlass into the Chandelure, so whatever they have in back is very clearly weak to Chandelure. Opponent commits the shield. Look at the boosted Incinerate damage. Oh my goodness. Frostlass getting absolutely torn to shreds. Frostlass is going to get farmed down. What does the opponent have in the back? It's a Shadow Victory Bell. I'm firing off this Flame Charge. Unfortunately, the Rage Leaf that snuck will secure the KO, but up a shield, Whimsicott can actually win this, because unlike the Venusaur we saw in the previous battle, Victory Bell has no bulk. This resistant Moonblast nearly gets the KO. It gets an attack drop, but honestly, that attack drop does not affect the outcome of this game. My opponent, even after the Acid Spray, was not going to be able to farm down, and Whimsicott will comfortably reach the double resisted Grass Knot. Grass Knot will secure the KO, and despite the terrible lead and terrible switch, we're able to take the game. Speaking of tough leads, we're now 3 for 3 on lost leads, this time leading Whimsicott into Charge-a-Bug. I'm farming up with the Whimsicott. Whimsicott is going to be firing off the Moonblast. Moonblast does massive damage. I'm expecting them to throw when they get to the back-to-back, so I switch into Fortress, and I'm able to catch the X-Scissor where it is going to be resisted. Opponent farming up. They're going to bank a discharge for later, and they send in Palisand. Palisand farming up energy, and they're firing off a charge move here. Opponent is going to go for the Scorching Sands. Scorching Sands will not get the KO, and I'm able to make it to the last second Earthquake. Earthquake does some very nice damage onto the Sandcastle, and I did need to bait this out, as hopefully this is their only counter to Chandelure, and then Shadow Chandelure can do well in the back, but this Shadow Ball is going to hurt. I'm able to get the farm down with a small amount of HP remaining in the back. Oh no, it's Greninja, and disaster has struck. Grass Knot gets the shield. I make it to a second Grass Knot, but the issue is my opponent has a discharge banked, and they have a Greninja with energy. Opponent farming up, throwing on perfect charge move timing here. They already have back-to-back Night Slashes. I will commit the shield. Opponent firing off another charge move, and this is going to be really tough, as my opponent does have a move banked, and they've gotten both shields. Greninja gets the boost, and there's just not a win con available for me at the moment. I can get the KO with the Flame Charge, but the Volt Switch will register before my Incinerate, and my opponent takes the win. Picking up a pretty positive lead in the next match, Whimsicott into Carbink. Whimsicott, of course, able to spam out super effective damage with Grass Knot and has a pacing advantage over Carbink as well. So the opponent staying in means they've got to have something in the back that is not a big fan of Whimsicott. Opponent has farmed up quite a lot of energy here. They are going to fire off the Rock Slide, and that's not a problem for Whimsicott whatsoever. Whimsicott very close to the back-to-back Grass Knots here, going for Grass Knot number 1. Opponent commits to shield. Carbink cannot get the farm down as Whimsicott makes it to Grass Knot number 2. Grass Knot will be shielded as the opponent has burned both shields on their Carbink. I'm now going to send in Fortress. I cannot have the Carbink seeing the Shadow Chandelure whatsoever. Carbink goes for the Rock Slide. That does some solid damage. I'm looking to go for the Mirror Shot as soon as I get it. I need to get rid of this Carbink as soon as I possibly can and trust in Shadow Chandelure. It's Amanda Buzz with Air Slash. I send in the Chandelure, and in the back is Toxapex. I'm going for the neutral Shadow Ball here. And Shadow Ball from a Shadow Chandelure does so much damage to a Toxapex. Oh my goodness. Toxapex will go for the Brine. I'm farming up with the Chandelure. And now I'm going for the Flame Charge. This is resisted, but I need to boost up my damage because Mandibuzz is available in the back for my opponent, and it's extremely tanky. Mandibuzz looking for the farm down, but Shadow Chandelure able to make it to one final Flame Charge. Boosted Flame Charge. Big damage to the Mandibuzz. In comes the Fortress. And the question will be, can Fortress make it to a Mirror Shot? I commit the shield on the Aerial Ace. Fortress makes it to the Mirror Shot, and Mirror Shot will be enough to KO the remaining HP on the Mandibuzz, and we take the win. Moving into the next match, we see a very nice lead in the next match. Whimsicott into Dragalge. Opponent save switches into Charjabug, and this is where the glassiness of Shadow Chandelure is definitely to its detriment. As you can see, these Volt switches are absolutely shredding through the Chandelure. My opponent is actually running Crunch, but even if they had Discharge, I would have to shield it anyway, because again, Shadow Chandelure has no bulk whatsoever. This thing is the epitome of a glass cannon, fully maxing out the attack in exchange for not being able to tank a hit whatsoever. I leave with boosted energy, but unfortunately, I am just short of a Shadow Ball, so I'm only going to make the boosted Flame Charge into the Dragalge. Despite the fact that it's resisted, it still does about half of their remaining HP. In the bag, they have Toxapex, and I've got to get the Whimsicott out of there as soon as possible and send in the Shadow Fortress. Fortress does extremely well into Toxapex. Toxapex can go for multiple brines, but the nice thing is I'm able to tank multiple brines. And Earthquake will hit for super effective damage. Opponent lets it through. Earthquake does not get the KO, but it puts them into a perfect range where I can start grabbing shields with Mirror Shot. Because at this point, if they want to win the game, they have to keep the Toxapex alive. So this is an incredibly safe time to go for a Mirror Shot. Mirror Shot into the Toxapex will grab the final shield. Opponent, switch timer coming up. In comes Dragalge, and I can send in the Whimsicott. Most Dragalge in this cup are running Aqua Tail and Outrage, which means their energy is completely walled. So I can just farm up to 100 energy. The timing isn't great, I throw on alignment, but it doesn't end up mattering because the Moonblast secures the KO. In comes the Toxapex, and because I farmed up to 100, I'm very close to the Grass Knot. So Whimsicott is a Toxapex counter confirmed, and we win the game. We see another great lead in the next match, Whimsicott into Shadow Golurk. Shadow Golurk, one of my favorite Pokemon in this format, so it's a bit unfortunate to kind of hard counter it on the lead. Opponent save switches into a Charjabug. I send in the Chandelure. I know I have to go down shields in this matchup, but my opponent overfarms and they play to a CMP tie. Chandelure not only wins the CMP, but is able to land the Flame Charge. Opponent losing 2 X-Scissors of energy in the process. Golurk mud slaps down the Chandelure, but that boosted Incinerate did a lot of damage. And my opponent, because that mid-match was so fast, is going to be stuck in this really unfortunate matchup for quite some time. I continue to farm up with the Whimsicott, and I'm going to be firing off this Grass Knot. Grass Knot will be shielded by my opponent. Their switch clock is up, and they're staying in. So whatever's in back may not be a big fan of the Whimsicott. However, I know that I can live the Shadow Punch, get to a Grass Knot, and up a shield. Shadow Fortress is an absolute menace. So I will secure the KO. In the back, it's a Pawniard. This is actually a team that I myself featured. I really, really like the team. Unfortunately for my opponent, losing the 2 X-Scissors worth of energy means that the Pawniard is now in an unwinnable position in the endgame because I still have a shield remaining. If my opponent got the boost on the first, I could shield the second, but since they didn't, I'm going to be able to tank the second, make the Earthquake, and Earthquake will secure the KO onto the Pawniard. Moving into the next match, we see a very nice lead Whimsicott into Sableye, although honestly not as good of a lead as you might expect. I'm farming up, I'm going for the Grass Knot bait, opponent catches onto an Azumarill, and I have never been so happy to have a move caught in my life. That is amazing. I'm farming up with the Whimsicott, going for the Grass Knot just before they make the Ice Beam. If they shield, I'm planning on throwing one Fairy Wind and then catching onto the Fortress, but my opponent actually throws on alignment, which throws me off a little bit. I'm going to commit the shield as they go for the Ice Beam. I can now farm up to the back-to-back Grass Knots, and since I know my opponent likes to throw on alignment, if they shield, I'm just going to undertap the move and win CMP, and that's exactly what they do. They shield, they try and go for the undertap, but I win CMP, down goes the Azu, and now my opponent is going to send in the Sableye. Sableye will fire off the charge move. That's perfectly fine by me. They go for the foul play, and they actually send in a Toxapex. So this is a bit tricky. I'm going to send in Fortress. And Fortress is going to be able to make it to an Earthquake after tanking a Brine, but an Earthquake does not KO. And I kind of don't really have anywhere for my Chandelure to go. My Chandelure is a bit of a tricky Pokemon to send in because I know the Sableye is one off of a foul play. So I think what I have to try and do is wait for them to throw, try and incinerate down, and leave with a move to get rid of the Sableye. So I send in the Chandelure, Chandelure looking for the incinerate farm down, but the Toxapex lives the move, and this is bad. I'm going to wait a turn here, anticipating a combo play. They don't go for it. I throw the Incinerate. They waited for me to throw the Incinerate. They snipe with the foul play, and now I'm in trouble. Back in comes the Fortress. Fortress, I'm only going to make it to the Mirror Shot. Mirror Shot into the Sableye. We'll get them low. Oh my goodness, the Fury Cutter KOs. It's a race. Fury Cutter versus Poison Jab, and it ends in a tie. We see an amazing lead in the next match, Whimsicott into Obstagoon, but the opponent save switches into a Golisopod, and I am completely core broken. I do not have a good response to a Golisopod save switch whatsoever, so I feel like I'm kind of forced to stay in here with the Whimsicott. This is really uncomfortable, but if I can win switch, then I can put the Fortress onto the Obstagoon later in the game, which is honestly fine. They're going to be firing off another X-Scissor here. I'm a bit surprised to see them running X-Scissor, as typically when I see it in the Ultra League, it's running Aerial Ace, but X-Scissor does make sense in this meta, as there's a lot of stuff like Greninja that really does not appreciate it. I'm very low, but I have the energy for the Grass Knot here, so I'm going to undertap it, but my opponent makes a beautiful play, catching that onto Trash Wormadam. But now I have Shadow Incinerates from Chandelure to absolutely melt through the Wormadam. Wormadam lives with a fraction of HP, and I'm forced to switch out. This is not good. I catch the Bug Buzz, but I have lost so much health in the Chandelure, and there's still the Obstagoon in the back. And unfortunately, my Fortress cannot pick up the KO with a resisted Mirror Shot here. Mirror Shot into the Golisopod, will not get the KO as I feared, and they're going to fire off the charge move. They go for the liquidation, they send in the Obstagoon, and I no longer have a win con. My opponent, unfortunately, just played very well, and I wasn't able to really get the alignment that I was searching for, and Obstagoon is going to secure the KO with massive overkill onto the Shadow Chandelure with a Night Slash. Hopping into the final match, hitting Whimsicott into Guzzlord. This is amazing as I have two really good checks to them on. Opponent sends in their Fortress save switch. I send in Chandelure. My switch was a little slow, so I was worried about them making it to an Earthquake, so I decide to play it safe and just go for a Flame Charge. But the opponent can send back in the Guzzlord, and those Dragon Tails are going to shred through the Chandelure. Oh, they actually send in a Carbink. Carbink is going to secure the farm down before I make it to a Shadow Ball, so I'm only able to go for the boosted Flame Charge. Carbink tanks it like it's nothing, but at this point, I'm completely in the driver's seat of this match, as both of my opponent's remaining Pokemon get torn to shreds by both my Whimsicott and my Fortress. I'm able to grab a shield with a Grass Knot. Opponent is going to be firing off their charge move. I can tank the Rock Slide, no problem. I wait a turn to make sure they don't catch a Grass Knot onto the Guzzlord, and I fire off this Grass Knot. That's going to connect. I switch into the Fortress, but unfortunately, I cannot get the Bug Bite farm down before they make it to a Rock Slide. But either way, I should be in the driver's seat of this match, as this is a really poor matchup for Guzzlord. I will go for the Mirror Shot before they're able to make it to a Crunch or a Brutal Swing. Mirror Shot will connect. I don't get the debuff. Here, I go for the Mirror Shot, looking to do it one Bug Bite before they make it to back-to-back. But unfortunately, whether through operator error or a frame drop, it ends up being a CMP tie. Mirror Shot will be shielded by the Guzzlord, but Guzzlord, unfortunately for my opponent, is just running out of HP here. Dragon Claw not gonna cut it, and we see the farm down of both the Guzzlord and the Carbink by Fortress. All in all, Shadow Chandelure outputs a truly ridiculous amount of damage, but it's so glassy that it is incredibly difficult to use. It's definitely a Pokemon that I would classify as a Pokemon for fun and not for climbing, because even if there's resisted fast move pressure, if it's a high damage fast move, you're gonna get farmed down. So it's definitely a high risk, high reward Pokemon. I'm super happy it's in the game as it's a ton of fun to run, but again, not a Pokemon I'd recommend for climbing as this thing is so frail. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.